Hello, fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here. Just a heads up before we get started, this is going to be a more serious video. It's a topic that I've avoided for a while, only occasionally getting into online spats about it, and never properly addressing it. Now, however, said issue has gotten far larger, and it's rapidly becoming the Rakshasa in the room. Catalysts themselves have gone and stuck their noses in it, and when the company that currently runs the IP is fucking it up, then I think it's time to start talking about it. The issue in question is the injection of present-day social issues and politics into the Battletech universe. Now, I realize that I don't have a perfect track record when it comes to this. I made a video where I experimented with some present-day politics in the form of a few jokes. The results were, well...
It was not cake, it was cringe, father.
I've made a point since then of avoiding it in my Battletech lore videos. After all, I'm supposed to be the grandson of an FRR freedom fighter, not an even less funny version of Steven Crowder or, God forbid, Matt Walsh. Ugh. I've determined that since I place myself within the setting of Battletech, 21st century social justice and politics don't really fit my vibe. After all, nobody wants to hear about Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or children at drag shows while they're trying to enjoy their big stompy robots. This was the stance that I grew into over time, and it's one that I stand by. I am a highly political person in the real world and on social media, but Battletech isn't the place for it. Unfortunately, it seems that Catalyst doesn't agree, and the shit show that's resulted from their shenanigans has been one of the biggest L's I've ever witnessed in the world of tabletop gaming. And keep in mind that I was present for Games Workshop's You Will Not Be Missed post. That being said, Catalyst's role in this story is actually surprisingly minimal, and the vast majority of the cringe comes from regular discourse in Battletech fan communities. So what happened? If you've been following the community tab, and you should because it's based, then you may have caught a couple snippets of what's been going down. The abbreviated version is Redditors doing Redditor things. Put simply, the Battletech subreddit has been run by fans for a while, and not the current owners of the IP. They've had a few basic rules for posting, and one of the big ones was a blanket no politics rule. From what I've seen, they've used this rule to take down numerous posts from both left and right-leaning people who try to inject current events into their Battletech posts. A few have probably slipped through the cracks here and there, as is the case for any place on the internet, but it's been a fairly normal place where people post their Battletech stuff and generally have a good time engaging with the rest of the community. Unfortunately, like every other good thing in this world, it wasn't to last, because June came a-knockin'. June is an interesting time of the year, where big companies pretend to give a shit about social issues that have nothing to do with their products or services. They change their logos to rainbow flags, make posts about how much they love LGTV, and generally try to be as gay as possible. Unless you live in the Middle East, in which case it's business as usual. Typically, most folks just roll their eyes and carry on as if it wasn't happening, but some folks get really into it, and use it as an excuse to shove their political and/or social movements into places where they don't belong. This is what happened in the Battletech subreddit. A collection of fanfiction was posted on the site, one which advertised itself as being, and I quote, queer tales from the inner sphere. What you see on screen now is the cover. I don't think I need to point out the obvious symbology present throughout the artwork. The trans flag is clearly displayed, rainbows are everywhere, trans rights or I bites is emblazoned on the mech. All of these are pretty clearly meant to invoke present-day social debates, given that they're presented with all the subtlety of a Gauss slug to the cockpit. The Pride angle is taking center stage, while the Battletech angle is merely a backdrop. I subjected myself to the stories in question and can confirm that they are much the same. A collection of mid-stories about being LGTV that have about as much to do with Battletech as Rings of Power writers have to do with functioning brainstems. Due to the self-evident non-Battletech nature of the subject matter, the post was removed under the no politics rule. What ensued was nothing short of a shitstorm. Reddit being Reddit, there was a great deal of screeching over the blatant homophobia/transphobia/queerphobia/fill-in-the-blank phobia that was so obviously motivating the decision. Others clapped back, pointing out that, sir, this was indeed, as a matter of fact, a Wendy's. Vitriol abounded, church bells rang, nuclear missiles rained down from Moscow, fighter jets screamed overhead, and Alan Moore somehow managed to get even uglier. When the smoke cleared, things were in shambles, the subreddit was locked, and needless to say, a lot of people were pissed off. Then, of course, in typical fashion, Catalyst decided to get in on the action. In honor of Pride Month, they opened their own official Battletech subreddit and used the previously deleted fanfiction post to promote their own more inclusive space. Now, apparently, the owner of the original subreddit was asleep or something because he came back like... I'm sure we can all understand how he must have been feeling. However, the course of action he chose to take was... unfortunate. Rather than reiterate the reasons for the rules being what the rules were, he decided to kick out his entire moderation team and delete the rule in question entirely. Apparently, Battletech is now for everyone, just so long as you hold the correct opinions. If you don't, then you will not be missed. To put it mildly, the situation is beyond screwy. It's downright fornicated, adulterated, and quite possibly even fucked. Hey, remember when Battletech was about giant robots shooting the shit out of each other?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
This exact kind of explosion is precisely why no politics rules are set in the first place. If your game day at the local store ends in a set of circumstances so horrendous that fucking Polygon writes an article about it, you know you fucked up somewhere along the line. And on that note, I would like to pivot and address something that I think needs to be laid out in no uncertain terms. Real talk, when you come in to play or discuss Battletech, or engage with any fandom for that matter, leave your IRL nonsense behind. Nobody cares what you like to do with your genitals in the privacy of your own home, either alone or with a consenting adult. Nobody gives a shit who you voted for. No one asked for you to lay out all your personal beliefs. The only thing we care about is the BV of your force, what faction they are, and whether or not we can make your robots go boom before you do the same to ours. To be absolutely clear, this is a standard that goes both ways. I don't want to see red baseball caps on your elementals, I will be just as annoyed if your mechs show up with a super straight insignia pasted everywhere, and nobody in 3025 should be flying a Gadsden flag. Leave it at home. If your mechs need a paint job that isn't camouflage, then check out camo specs online and find one that suits your force, or come up with one that makes sense in-universe. Battletech isn't a mouthpiece for your ideologies. The only politics it needs are the machinations of the great houses and the clans. People come here to take a break from the real world. It's the entire point of having hobbies and escapist fiction. There is a time and a place for debating social issues and pushing agendas. The gaming table and its associated social media platforms are not among them. I have seen this insanity bleed into Battletech ever since I first joined the hobby. I didn't think much of it at first. I even made a video about letting in 40k refugees, which I now deeply regret making. I was incredibly naive to think that we weren't big enough to be a target for the same bullshit that ruined 40k for so many people. Things have changed since then.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
I've seen entire companies of battle mechs painted in the colors of the present-day social movement. Must be real encouraging to know that even in the distant future their problems still haven't been resolved. Of course, by the painter's own admission, these weren't made this way for any in-universe reason, they were painted this way to make so-called bigots upset. Battletech's social media spaces have devolved into a constant string of social justice bait posting, where the beautiful work of talented people is overshadowed by tourists looking for attention in the same way a 2-year-old does. It's some of the most immature and childish bullshit I've ever seen. I've tolerated it. Hell, I'm even ashamed to say that I've participated in it myself. But it's draining all the fun out of Battletech for not just myself, but everyone else as well. We've had enough, and it's time to put the foot down on this before things go completely out of control. I'm aware of the phrase, Battletech is for everyone. It's a good phrase, with good intentions, but even when it first appeared I suspected that it would be abused, and it has. It's a phrase with an implied asterisk. Battletech is for everyone, except for the people I don't like. I've never seen such an inclusive phrase used so exclusively outside of Animal Farm.
1984.
Battletech is indeed for anyone who wants to join in, but that means you have to actually join in. When you're trying to shoehorn your political and social movements into the game, you're not playing anymore, you're preaching. This isn't a lance of mechs, it's a sermon in miniature form that has nothing to do with the world or game itself, and it will be treated as such. It has no place on the table not because we hate the message itself, but because we don't want to be lectured while we play our space robot game. Take that shit back to Sigmarxism where it belongs. After all, I'm sure it's no coincidence that so many of the accounts engaging in this behavior overlap with that godforsaken hellscape. When it comes right down to it, my approach going forward is quite simple. Battletech content will be purely Battletech related. Any attempt at cramming in current affairs will be disregarded, whether it comes from the left or the right. Battletech is a glorious product of the 1980s, and all the good and bad that comes with that origin will be kept intact. I myself remain political, and I am more than willing to discuss the issues of the present day with anyone who's willing to have a civil conversation, but Battletech is a Wendy's. This is where we come to have fun, and if your version of fun requires you to be able to lecture people on your pet ideologies or seek constant validation for your lifestyle choices, then I'm not interested in sharing the table with you. Conversely, if you hold an ideology I disagree with, even one that I find morally reprehensible, but you can put it all aside for a fun game of stompy robots, then I'd be more than happy to enjoy this hobby with you. Battletech is for Battletech fans. Tourists can kindly fuck off back to 40K. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this is Mage Leader, signing off.